In this video, we're going to look at how we change the subject to a formula using a function machine. We'll then go on to look at the parallel with solving an equation and changing the subject. Now we look at this formula in front of us, v equals u plus at. And that's a formula you may have seen in physics. Velocity equals the initial velocity plus acceleration times speed. At the moment, v is the subject. It's on its own on one side of the equals sign. What we want to do is make t the subject. So we want t on its own on one side of the equals sign. So the way we're going to tackle this is we're going to look at what happens to t when we calculate what we have to do to t to work out what v will be. So we're going to start off with t on the left hand side. So t we multiply by a up here, and then we add on the value of u, and that will give us the value of v. So this time we're now going to work our way back to see if we start with v, how do we end up with t? Well, let's have a look. We start with v, and the first thing we do to v, well, let's have a look. We do the inverse. The inverse of add u is take away u. So at this point we'll have v take away u. Now let's have a look at what happens with this box here. We had multiply by a, so we'll now have divide by a. Then that will give us t. So here we had v take away u, and that will then be divided by a. So therefore t will be equal to v take away u divided by a. And note here, the whole of v take away u is divided by a, because that here is what is going into that box. And t is now on its own on the left hand side of the equal sign, and is now the subject. We'll now continue by looking at the parallel between changing the subject to a formula and solving an equation. On the left hand side of my board I have an equation 2x plus 6 equals 10, and when we say we want to solve the equation, we want to end up with x on its own on one side of the equal sign and all the numbers on the other side. So first thing we do is we take 6 from each side. So we're left with 2x equals 4. Then we divide each side by 2. So we end up with x equals 2. So I've got x on its own and the numbers on the other side. Now let's look at what we do when we solve an equation. We want to end up with t on one side of the equal sign and all the other things on the left hand side. So we're going to have t on the right hand side, all the letters on the left hand side. So we look at this equation. First thing we can do is take away u from each side. So we have v take away u equals at. Because what's happened here is u take away u is 0, and therefore we're not going to bother writing that. And this side will have v take away u. Now on the right hand side we have a lots of t. So what we'll do is we'll divide by a on each side. So then we'll have v minus u divided by a, and that will equal t. T is now on its own and therefore is the subject of the formula. So t equals v minus u divided by a.